Everyone, welcome back to the UXi podcast, and for this video we are talking player monitoring and data analysis. With me I've got Heinrich Peincheck and Dr. Steve Den Hollander. Welcome guys.
Thanks, Andrew.
First question to Dr. Steve. Tell us, what is player monitoring?
Player monitoring, in essence, it's the systematic process of analyzing or collecting and analyzing data where we can basically track guys' wellness, their overall health and player development.
Okay. And it's a very new system for a lot of parents to understand, and even some of the players coming out of school.
Yeah.
So why is it important to track them?
I think exactly that, what you're saying. So we've got a wide range of guys at our institutes. Some guys who have just for the first time been introduced to things like this, and other guys who went to schools where they had systems in place, played Craven Week. So we want to monitor all our guys on an individual basis and see how they're reacting to the new training load of training 5 times a week, how they are doing with habits with regards to recovering from training and matches in terms of their sleep, their mood, things like that, their match performance in games, guys that are now also playing for clubs, how we're monitoring those loads. So we put all these systems in place so that we can monitor guys on an individual basis and make sure that they are developing and performing to their optimal ability.
Okay. And Heinrich, would you tell us what systems you use to track the players across the different platforms?
Yeah, so from a match performance point of view, we use, I'll sort of break it into 2 processes, one to capture and then the second to feedback. So capturing, we use NACSport, which is a video and game analysis software or performance analysis software. Ultimately, that's where we'll form a match or form a training session, plug it into NACSport. The analyst will sit and capture all our different performance indicators using the NACSport product. Then the video plus those codes get uploaded to a platform for the players and the parents to go and view. It's a platform called Sportivo. That's an online video-based platform where the video gets uploaded and all the codes get synced, and you can go and watch all your own clips and things like that. And then the last stage of the sort of feedback part is the stats output that we use. And there we use your Office 365 suite, from everything from Excel to Power BI, to build dashboards for the players, to build match outputs, and that kind of thing.
So you mentioned the word code. It might be a new concept for players and parents. What does that mean?
So the word code is probably, we use it in sport, but it's more, probably a better word to use is tagging. So it's not code when you think from an IT point of view where you're creating an app or something like that and it's writing in a certain language. It's tagging events on a video, sort of on a timeline, in a timeline fashion. Or every time a player makes a tackle, you capture that, you say, Andre tackle, and it was a positive tackle.
Okay.
That's tagging, coding.
All right. And Steve, what is the different types of data that you collect?
So we, on our day-to-day, we collect wellness data. So they're things like the player's moods, sleep quality, sleep duration. So on a day-to-day, we get that from the players. And then after every session, we ask the players how hard the session was. So that's called a rating of perceived exertion. So it's an RPE. And there's science that shows that that's as accurate and as reliable as heart rate monitors or heart rate variability. So we use that to track the load of our players at every training session.
Okay. And you've got different management team members. You've got coaches, you've got sports scientists. How do these different staff members use the data?
Yeah. So from a day-to-day, that's especially our strength and conditioning coaches. They manage the load of the players. We also have our life skills coaches who then also can interact with the players if something's flagged. So if a guy's not sleeping well, if his mood has been disturbed for a few days. So we collect the data, we analyze it into reports, and we feed that back to the coaches. So it's on a platform that they can go, every day they have access to this data and they can see basically how everyone's doing. Then over the term and over the years, we also do skill assessments. And that's where we get the guys to do drills or they do certain tests in the gym, and we track guys' performance and development over time. So from that, the coaches and the players also get information to feedback of the areas they can improve in, where their strengths and weaknesses are, and it helps them also just develop a personal development plan for themselves over the year to kind of see what are their goals and how can they get there.
Okay. Steve, you mentioned the word load, and it's a concept that's discussed a lot in player monitoring and assessment. I know it's mentioned a lot in team meeting, or at least coaching meetings. What is load, and how do you measure it?
Yeah, so load it's actually quite a complex thing, but it's basically how hard, or what is the effort that you're putting into it. And it's not just physical, it can be emotional, psychological. So it's this essence of how much work are we making the players do. And we want to monitor that, because if you do too little work, you're not going to improve. So we're not going to see those improvements you want. But if you do too much work too quickly, you're going to get injured or burn out.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to kind of manage in this process.
And a measurement I remember that we often used was the acronym RPE, a rate of perceived exertion. And something that impressed me is our head of medical could monitor a player's RPE over a week or two. And you would look at those 2 weeks and he said, that player's going to get a cold next week. And then next week, the kid's sick. How does that work, and how can you forecast these types of things using RPE?
So RPE is basically it's how hard the session was. And if a guy so it's on a scale of 1 to 10,
okay,
but it's not a linear scale. It's more of a 5 is actually hard. So 1 to 5 is like a slow progressive build up, but then after 5 it spikes. So 5 is hard, 7 is very hard, and 10 is I'm actually going to collapse. So when you start to see kind of progressively someone's RPEs are very high, so a session where everyone else is finding it hard, or a 5 or a 4, and there's a guy that's finding this very hard all the time, that kind of indicates you that is an indicator that they might have an overload. And one of the symptoms of overloads is, or one of the kind of results is getting sick.
okay,
So we also tie that into our morning updates, so that your wellness monitoring, because there we can already pick up before that we reach that stage. If you start seeing someone's sleep declines, the quality of sleep, all of those things start getting affected, then you also know he's going to get sick. So we try and actually intervene before that point.
okay. So last question on this. So you actually use RPE to predict based, it's almost a relational thing. The player gives you an indication after the session. He feels the session was this, but the group average was here.
Yes.
And that gives you an idea of, this player found this more difficult than the average of the group. And
yeah.
okay.
So as a result, then those players might be asked for the Thursday or Friday's training session. Actually, you just need to take it a bit easier this week. But similarly, if a guy's been a bit too low, he might do a top-up session on a Friday. Okay. So that's how our strength and conditioning coaches use this information to kind of guide the players and make sure no one gets sick or injured.
And similarly, if coaches design a certain session to be more a skills development session and not a hard-working one, if that session's meant to be low RPE, but the player measures it as quite tough, then you also know that this player is in a difficult position.
Yes.
Okay, great.
But at the same time, then it also, you want to work with your analysts that are on the side of the field. Often they're filming, or get one of the coaches to see actually what was the guy doing in the session. Was he actually working hard? And that's kind of also a check that sometimes a guy can say the session was hard, but if you actually watching him, it wasn't. So then it's also need to have a conversation with him about how do you perceive hard?
Yes.
So it's also, there are a lot of kind of things where we check our data and we don't just accept one thing as this is it.
Yes. So Heinrich, data analysis or data, however you want to call it, it's a massive buzzword in modern sport, professional sport. And often, especially if you watch American sports, they've got thousands of bits of data and analysis. How do you decide what's important and what's not? So you're not just flooding every little piece of data where most of it might be irrelevant. How do you decide what is important?
So from a match performance point of view, the stuff we find important is we kind of relate to the testing as well. So the generic skills that you need to be a good rugby player. If we're measuring that in training and we measure the same things in performance, then we can actually see if there's improvements, but you're not going to see that if you measure everything. And also there's a common phrase called analysis paralysis. So giving the coaches too much data sort of hinders the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. So keeping it simple for the players to understand, easy markers they can target. So when they get their match stats after a game, for example, it shows when we look at their work rate of, for example, tackles per minute that they played, they can see what the position average is across the UXi Institute. So they have a direct target. And if they know they're a loose forward, and their roles and responsibilities as laid out by the coach is to make tackles, hit breakdowns, but they're below the average, then they're not achieving that, they're not doing their job in essence. Because you'll have different types of loose forwards, some will carry, some will tackle, some will jackal. So yeah, you want to sort of make sure your data tells a story and just stay sort of nice and simple.
Yes, and the outcome determines what you collect.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And how do you present this to the players?
So we have a few, obviously with Dr. Steve and myself working close together, we have a few ways we present it to our management staff. So they have because it's all in the office suite, all our databases we can consolidate into one location. And Steve built a report for the program managers, so they can go on there and bring up any player's name. When they're on a phone call with a parent, they can see exactly based on all the RPE data and things like that, they can see how many sessions they've attended. So what's their attendance been like, what's their injury history, their match performance data, some of that will pull through. So it's sort of a little snapshot of the player as a whole. So when you're chatting to that stakeholder, you can have sort of all the right information at hand. And then in terms of parents and players, so the players will get, after every game, they get a single page report that breaks their stats down into attack, defense, points and discipline, and breakdowns. And they get all this single page document for that. And then at the end of each term, they will get a performance profile, and the performance profile will look at all the games. So for argument's sake, if you've played 17 games, we'll show you your average tackle success rate per game, your average tackles that you make per game, and again, that will be compared to your positional group. So if you're a center, you'll be compared with all the centers around the country. Yeah. If you're a scrum half, you'll be compared with all the scrum halves.
And obviously data doesn't lie, so it's the best tool for performance review. If a player sits with you, or parent wants to know, why is my son not making the team, why is he not progressing, the data is obviously the first thing that you're going to show them.
Yeah, and then just to elaborate on how we feedback not only the data, because obviously again, like Steve mentioned, you have to marry the footage with data, because you'll never get a true story if you look at just the video or just the data. So we have regular feedback sessions with the boys from a team analysis point of view, where the analysts on site will give a feedback session with the boys. But then as the week goes on, they'll have one-on-one sessions. So they'll go and sit with the analyst one-on-one, look at the game from the weekend past. If they want to book a session with the analyst to sort of get some feedback and tips, they can do that. So we encourage the boys to make use of that. They need to drive that and go and sit with them and really try and learn. Because once you start watching a game again and again, and you get those repetitions in again and again, you're going to become a better decision maker when you presented with that situation on the field without even thinking about it, because it happens so quickly. But the more reps you get, the better decisions you'll make.
Yep. And Steve, last question. Obviously, we want to empower players to be high-performance individuals. How do you teach young players to use the data?
I think it's one of the things is then to look at your testing data and then look at your match stats and kind of say, okay, this is where I'm at, where do I want to be? So setting realistic goals. So using the data as kind of a marker of your progression. Yeah. In terms of wellness, to use it kind of as an education thing. So how many hours do I need to sleep a night? What can I do to make sure I have good quality sleep? So to kind of use it as an educational thing also for yourself. So take care of yourself, be ready to train every day, to identify the things that can help you do that, and then to also just set goals using the data that will help you actually have realistic and objective targets to reach.
Okay, great. Gentlemen, thanks very much. It was data and monitoring. We hope that we were able to simplify it in a way that's understandable. We'll see you on the next podcast video.